Hey everybody, how's it going? Sorry,
Hey guys.
I might have noticed like a hiccup for a second there. My Discord actually crashed, but we're good.
Awesome. Well, guys, welcome again back to the Shinies and Luckydos discussion. We are going to be talking about Maraudon. Hey. So we're going to be covering Maraudon and the Elemental Lords. So today, a little bit that we're going to go over is, one, we're going to talk about Therazane and her love affair with Zaytar. And we're definitely going to dive into some speculation and all of that. But today we have Shirviu with me, and then we have Ren Wiki once again. Unfortunately, Lhok couldn't join us today. She's got a sick kiddo. We hope their kid gets better soon. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump right in. If Shirviu, you want to go ahead and talk about Princess?
Sure. Okay, so you guys probably are aware of Princess Therazane, the end boss in the Maraudon dungeon. Basically, first off, we're going to be talking just about Maraudon specifically, so she ties into that, of course. And then in the second half, we're going to be covering the 4 elemental lords. This stream is probably only going to take about 2 hours today. We're going to try and get them done in like 1 hour each. But so starting right off, Princess Therazane. So she's basically the daughter of Therazane, the elemental lord of Earth. And the story of Maraudon really all starts out with her. The Tauren people are, worshipping the Earth Mother. As you guys know, they worship Anshe, the sun god. They also worship the Earth Mother. They have all these stories about the Earth Mother's loving hands going around the Earth and all the creatures springing up. But we don't actually really know what the Earth Mother is, who the Earth Mother is, how long ago this was, anything at all, because the Earth Mother dates back to before the Age of Memory. And as it turns out, a group of Tauren were, looking around. They thought that they were on some kind of trail. They thought that they had maybe found the Earth Mother, or that the Earth Mother was trying to communicate to them somehow. So they basically start performing all these rituals. Um, I'm as quiet as a mouse. Okay, wait. Let me see if I can turn myself up somehow. Vaski, do you want to take over for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. So when, besides with Anshe and the Earth Mother, let's begin with Maraudon. Really cool instance that was released out in patch 1.2. So there was definitely a lot of cool things going on when that released in patch 1.2. We've got filled with ancient centaurs. It was a whole new area. A lot of people are speculating between the Goliaths in the area. And the ultimate love affair with Therazane and Zaytar. There's a lot of mysteries. There's a lot of heartache in it. And with Princess Therazane, she's the daughter of the Stone Mother, Therazane. And a really cool, interesting thing is that she was awoken by the Tauren itself, and in a fit of rage, she drained the land of, I can't pronounce it right, Mahanche. It's a very interesting word. I can't pronounce it, But that ended up igniting her powers once more, and that created the wasteland known as Deathless now. Now, this draining of so much life ended up being a massive wave that rippled all the way into the Emerald Dream. This ended up bringing Zaytar into things. Now, Rin, do you know some stuff about Maraudon, or is this new to you?
It's pretty much new to me. Like, I've obviously done the dungeon, and I've seen the things and done the quests, but to be honest, I don't really know like all the in-depth lore.
All right, well, cool. We're definitely gonna dive in it with you, and you'll learn some cool new things today with it. But
do I sound any better now, you guys? I just tried turning my mic up to 300% from 100. But I'm really new to like trying to figure out how this all works. So let me know if this sounds better. Sorry, Vaski.
You sound good to me.
I know, but like Discord is different than OBS apparently, and I'm always struggling with the sound.
Gotcha. So far on my side, you sound really good. I feel like I sound really loud, so.
Oh, well, I can turn you down. That's a thing that can happen. I'm
No
somewhat
problem.
better. Oh my god.
But I don't know how you guys feel. Like, Maraudon was one of my favorite instances in vanilla. Like, when it released, I was just like, okay, I'm hitting this place hard. Like, I loved all the crystals, the mystery behind it. You've got the Grove Wardens that were part of it, the Dryads. You had a lot of like parts of like the nightmare seeding in, everything. It was just, there was a whole entire enchanting way about it. What do you think, Ren? Did you really like it when you first got to see it?
Yeah, I first got to see it in the start of Cataclysm, and I think it was one of the like first dungeons that really let me know that this was definitely going to be like a unique game. And I remember when I was going through it the first time, and I just like loved it because there was so many different things that you could focus on, and obviously it was like split into two different dungeons when I had to do it, but like it's really awesome to see like such a unique dungeon. And I think that's really what got me into wanting to go into lore, was just seeing like all this stuff and then having to like figure out what each tiny aspect was.
I know, and the thing is too, is in Deathless, it gave you only like a small helping of what truly was in the entire instance. I mean, I didn't even know about Zaytar, really. I only know about Princess, but I never really paid attention to the corpse that was sitting there and why she was pacing around. I thought it was just like something that was part of the dream back then. And I was so naive to it till probably about like a year or 2 years ago, with learning that when Zaytar emerges from the Emerald Dream to see that ripple that happened, that he becomes enchanted by her. And it's not really for the fact of being enchanted by her, but for the fact that he was swayed. Because, like, for instance, when they're keepers of the grove, they're attracted to that life and fauna so much. And when she sucked all of that life from that area and making Deathless, he was attracted by the life within her, not her itself. I mean, honestly, who's going to be attracted to that face? Only a mother can love that face.
Oh, Vaski.
I'm sorry, I apologize. But she does become obviously the mother of the Centaur race and whatnot. She's a very cool character. Shirviu, what do you think about Therazane, other than her hideous face?
Well, in terms of her design, I always thought that she was just really ugly, and I never really got that, right? Like, I don't know if there's some kind of external mythos that they're drawing from with that, but it's also interesting how she kind of has three faces. Like, I feel, and she has like is it four or is it six arms? So there's definitely something that they're drawing from with inspiration to create her character. But in terms of like her herself, we don't actually really know much about her at all. It's very strange how she specifically like tries to keep the body in Maraudon. Like that in itself is really weird, but it honestly makes me wonder if that's because he could be reborn. Like what if he could be reborn and she knows that and we're just not privy to that part of the story.
Right now, she does state to Cho'Gall though that she really was actually in love with him, and that's why she kept his body within there. But she also, it's noted that she was also fearful of the repercussions coming from Cenarius and the wrath that might fall upon her with his death. But what I find interesting is that he really, like, his body and spirit's in the Emerald Dream. With him being kept there, he was basically locked as a wandering spirit, and he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't be, in a sense, reborn, because he could have came back. But for millennia, he was stuck there with her pacing around his corpse.
Right, because with anything tied to the dream, if it dies on the physical world, then it'll just be reborn in the dream. Maybe they actually didn't want him to get reborn in the dream. Maybe she thought that he would be stolen away from her or something.
Possibly. There's other people that say that they possibly, with all the corruption, I mean, you even get satyrs that come in there, and I mean, they were aligned with the old gods long ago when it came to the elemental plane. So I mean, that could have a part in it. Of course, she was talking to Cho'Gall, which is a no-no in itself. But that she was using his body for corrupting the whole area and for doing no good, which is a possibility as well too, which would be terrible in itself as well.
But I wonder how she even got woken up. And I wonder what her goals were at this point going forward. Because even if she really did care for him, for Zaytir, it's also very convenient that, she used Cenarius's followers in order to awaken herself or free herself from the prison that the Titans put her in, into the elemental plane of Earth, into Deepholm. We don't exactly know where she was down in Deepholm trapped, but now that we've been to Deepholm and Cataclysm, I mean, wouldn't you think that I don't know, maybe I'm missing part of the lore. I didn't play Cataclysm. I didn't get that reputation up with Therazane or anything. But wouldn't you think that Theradris would have just been chilling down there? Or was she in some, like, special prison?
That's what I'm wondering, because, I mean, a really interesting thing, a lot of people don't know about it, but I'm not really good at pronouncing the name. Terramok? It's called Terramok. It's technically a Titan vault of where she was in, sleeping. That's down into where her cellar is at, is a Titan vault. So in itself, she could have been a prison, and waking up and taking all that life away, that's pretty weird. To suck the life from a whole entire zone. That's kind of monstrous.
Like, why is she different from Therazane, who's simply down there in Deepholm doing her own thing from within her plane, like all the elemental lords are doing at this point pretty much? Like, yeah, they can, ever since Deathwing broke through and opened up all the elemental planes, they're kind of coming and going a bit more, but this was all before that. When Theradris got out, that was all thanks to the Tauren people. So it definitely makes me wonder, like, what kind of ritual was used in order to get her out, and was she manipulating them in a way to achieve that? Because, I mean, the Tauren are basically praying to her. They think that she's the Earth Mother. She's really the Stone Mother. It's kind of unclear at what level of deception was going on and what level of deception she was participating in. But she clearly doesn't care about the Tauren. Her actual children, the Centaurs, are pretty much mortal enemies with the Tauren, and they're constantly warring, and they drive them out of their ancestral lands. So, I mean, Cenarius has a lot of reasons to hate her, to be quite honest, right?
Right.
It isn't just like how she's ugly and she's not to the Titan standards and she's not, like, covered in leaves and whatever. Right. It almost feels like Cenarius has almost usurped her mother in a way. If as the elemental lord of Earth, you think that she would have been heavily involved in nature, and she kind of would have been one of the authorities on the matter. And now Cenarius comes along, and it almost seems like they purposely are almost against the Druids and Cenarius and the Tauren and everything. At least I can see a motivation there.
Definitely. I mean, even his younger sibling, who is he's the maker and the producer of Dryads, Zaytar himself gets jealous of Romulos and goes on his own conquest to make his own brood. That's how jealous he was of his brother, and in the result of that, being swayed by her beauty for that, honestly, it's just the life that she had within her, that he was attracted to, was out to make his own race. So there's this jealousy factor in with it too, and the sinfulness, because even Remulus goes, don't do it, that, like, don't fall in love with her, don't become a mate with her, and he still did it anyways. It was almost like a family feud thing of, like, sin. It was strange.
Which is honestly kind of why I wonder if he wasn't under some kind of spell or manipulation as well. Like, you can argue that the Tauren were acting of their own will and they weren't under any necessarily a spell, but I don't think they just stumbled upon her and she was completely uninvolved in teaching them exactly what was required to free her. Like, it's weird enough that she was in her own little prison, but I feel like I would be on the side that she did manipulate Zatyr, and sure, maybe she did care about him, but it's kind of like almost like a love potion kind of thing. Like she's literally stolen his body away, and I think that that has a lot to do with it. The fact that if it was separated, it was taken outside of that pocket dimension or what have you that she's in. I feel like he would have gone back to the dream, and whatever link she had with him would have been severed.
I 100% agree with you, and I think she was afraid of losing that link. And he emits power, he emits more life, and supposedly in their mating with each other, they came to a conclusion that from what she sucked out of Desolus, that they could recreate life again in Desolus and revitalize it, with the two of them making like the perfect children, which clearly was not the case. They made monsters, if you really think about it.
I mean, yeah, but I feel as though the nature that we get on Azeroth, the ordered nature that's been delivered by the ordering from the Titans, I feel like that's very different from the nature that would have been present on primordial Azeroth when the elementals, the earth elementals, were in control. I mean, it's described in Chronicle how chaotic everything was, and mountains would be springing up and then flattening out, and it was crazy, right? So
Right.
the type of restoration she probably wanted to do with Desolus is probably a lot more akin to what her mother Therazane would have had in mind rather than what we're used to. And I feel like the satyr or the centaurs are kind of part of that. Like they're more they're not as ordered and pretty and perfect. They're more primordial and
Like
almost old
natural
gaudy.
flesh.
Yeah, they're more natural. I feel like that's kind of what Azeroth was like before. They're kind of more like the trolls, like um they're obviously not like the dryads.
Definitely agree with it. They're not like perfect, they're not pretty, like they've got just a natural order gift of flesh brought upon them. I can get on board with that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking that maybe if she did restore Desolus, it would look a bit more, not necessarily like Deepholm. Because what's interesting about Deepholm is that it's kind of like a cavern. But is Maraudon maybe the version of Deepholm? Like, is it inspired by what the Earth Elementals would have done on Azeroth if they had worked in harmony with the Titans instead of being like imprisoned? Because you notice within Maraudon there's a lot of stone, there's a lot of cliffs, and there's parts of it that aren't perfectly like covered in flowers and or anything like that. It's not exactly like Hyjal, but there's still a lot of beauty in it, of course, and it's a lot to do with the altitude and how you start off in this cave and you're climbing up to this like weird um it's like a waterfall, like mountainous waterfall area, right?
Yeah, it's almost like getting to like almost like a plateau kind of
And
deal.
I feel like it's basically kind of trying to show that that's a combination of the power of the elemental. Well, I mean, she's not an elemental lord, but the daughter of an elemental lord and the daughter of a titan creature, the daughter of like Cenarius.
Right. Well, and what's great too is that these centaur, if you really think about it, they are just like the dryads. They're a product of like great grandchildren of Malorn and Elune. That's incredible. Like you've got the elemental plane involved. Possible you've got Malorn, and then you've got Elune, who is a mystery in itself. Like, granted, yes, they're not the prettiest thing, but they could be in a way like perfect perfect flesh creatures that were supposed to be on our planet for Azeroth. It's kind of incredible, really, if you think about it, of what their whole family line is.
Yeah, I mean, I have some ideas about Malorn myself that are kind of beside the point. The Tauren worshipped Malorn as well, right?
Right, right.
As under the name Aparo. And we don't really know how old Malorn is, but I personally do wonder if Malorn was also changed in some capacity by, the Well of Eternity or the Titans or something to be the pretty stag that he is now. like maybe he was a bit more primordial before. It's hard to say, but that entire line of creatures that was made, you know, the dryads, the furbolgs, the fairy dragons, um, I can definitely see the centaurs fitting in there, but they're not. The only reason why they're completely rejected and that they're um, basically everyone just wars against them, wants to kill them, doesn't understand them. Sure, they kind of hate everybody too, but I really think it's all about that they're not like a perfect creature deemed to be. Like they're not one of the Titans' children. They're the elemental lords were there before the Titans, and that in itself is just like not acceptable.
Right. Now, for instance, now the centaur race, like Zatar, their father and creator that helped him, the keeper of the grove, when the five Khans were born that made the five clans, he looked upon them on disgust, and they were so like broken by that they killed their own father because they didn't like how they didn't accept him, and that created that rage that wanted them to take out and destroy things across the land, like of Azeroth. And they almost succeeded at it too.
I think that's also why the Tauren and them never got along, because they represented the mistake, I guess, if you will, that the Tauren made. Um, and then at the same time, the Tauren to them kind of represented what was an acceptable race, like what was accepted by Cenarius' whole side of the family, and that they weren't.
Right. 100%.
And it's pretty weird because, I mean, what's even the big difference between the two? They both have hooves, like they're both kind of, they're very similar to be honest, but the Tauren are like peaceful and calm and they love the earth. The Centaur are just like super ragey.
Now, what's really cool though in Cataclysm with the wild growth for the Taurens in the center there, it's ironic because the Taurens actually bring the clans back together in Cataclysm with the growth that's happening again, and it revitalized the Centaurs later down the line. You've got all this raging and hate, but eventually it's ironic, the one race that they almost completely wipe out and have a hate for is the ones that build them back up again to become all together instead of warring clans, which I found to be really interesting. I don't know if you guys did the questing in Cataclysm in that area, but it's kind of cool how they did that.
I haven't done any Cataclysm questing at all, but did you do that stuff, Rin? Did you like even quest in Deepholm and stuff?
Yeah, no, I did. I think it's really, really ironic, but the one thing it always makes me think back to is just that the Tauren come from the Yangle, and they're a really angsty race themselves. So they they have that like heritage of knowing what anger is. So I feel like there could be a misunderstanding on what the Tauren might actually be somewhere in the midst of it.
Yeah, I completely agree because we already have all this information on how the Tauren had a darker past, a darker history. And honestly, we're seeing those parallels all over the place. Like there's all these hints about how the Pandaren may have come from furbolgs, the night elves came from trolls, the aspects and the dragonflights came from proto-drakes. Constantly, we're seeing primordial races being prettified by the Titans. And you can see that again. I personally wonder if the Magnetor, if you remember those guys, if they perhaps are Therazane's children, like, because they're quite similar to centaurs. I've always wondered if they might be original creations of the elemental lords from back in the day, and that perhaps the Genosaurs are the Titan equivalents, like A&R, prettifying them or something. But that's kind of a tangent. But,
That is a tangent, but interesting.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying about the Yongle. The Tauren are like basically the Titan ordered version, and it's pretty sad how the Dryads treat the Centaurs, considering like they clearly don't have this. They're not seeing it from the same lens as us. They don't have this perspective that they're kind of just the prettified version, and that the Elemental Lords were here first, and the Titans are usurpers, and all of that.
Right.
The Kolkar don't exist anymore. Do the other four
Nope,
tribes then exist?
they do. But the Kolkar, yeah, end up getting wiped out, unfortunately. Rest in peace.
Sad times.
Oh, the Magram sided with the Cenarian Circle.
Yep.
Interesting. Well, I'm happy to see that they kind of got pulled back into the story marginally, at least.
Yeah, right?
But, on the topic of the different clans, Vaski and I were talking about this yesterday, or was it even this, maybe it was this morning, about how depending on which clan you ally with back in vanilla, you would get different quests, right? You had to raise up their reputation so that they would give you quests, and depending on who you chose, one of them would give you a quest to get like Maradrite ore or something, I'm not sure, crystals, and the other would be Draenithist crystals, is that right?
Right.
And I always, like, to this day, like, I've always found it, I remember, like, 10 years ago finding it interesting, right? Like, I've always found it super interesting, like, Draenithist, like, why is it, and I don't even remember the name of the other crystal, but it's something Maraudon something, like Maradrite, but like, where does Draenor come into this picture? We know that the dream is involved, and the dream clearly either it connects Azeroth and Draenor, or it's present on both, or the denizens of Draenor are aware of the dream and the dream's interacting. What did you guys make of that?
I found it because the elemental plane is kind of similar in a sense. I wouldn't be surprised if the elemental plane that's part of the wild elementals on Draenor would be interlinked with the ones technically on ours. That there's like a little blip in the system of how that possibly is. What do you think, Ren?
I don't know. I didn't play Classic.
Well, no, this isn't necessarily like Classic of like what you possibly think could be a result of that, of like the elemental plane and
Like,
whatnot.
with what you know about Maraudon in this moment, where can you tie Draenor in? Why would one of the crystals, of the two crystals present there, we have an orange one and a purple one, we have Maradrite or something, and Draenithist, which I would imagine Draenithist the purple one, because kind of sounds like amethyst, but, do you think there's a reason? Like, obviously there's a reason. I feel like with Blizzard there's a reason for everything. Why did they name that Draenithist? What kind of hint are they what are they trying to tell us?
Well, like, my only other answer for it is the Draenei, but they weren't even around back then. So I think the only way we could tie it in really is either just Wild Gods or the Emerald Dream, which there's not much you can really say because you can't have a really confirmed, like, yep, that's definitely the way it could go true. Like, it could come from anywhere. But it's a really specific starting for it. Like, there is a total reason why they'd use Draenithist, but I really wouldn't. I don't think I'd be able to go into Blizzard's head and understand. I feel like it's something that will be explained down the line.
So Lhok is saying in the chat, the Magram are orange side of Mara, and the Galkis are the purple side. And the Galkis are the ones who request that you get the Draenithist. So I guess the Draenithist is the purple one then. But what you said about the Draenei is actually, it is interesting, because, I mean, as we know, the Draenei are huge on crystals. They power their ships with crystals. I don't know.
Purple crystals.
At that point, would they have landed on Draenor already when the Centaur were created? Probably. I mean, do we really have? we don't have the strictest timeline. Etch, if you're there in the chat, I already forgot. Like, did Draenor get ordered by Agramar second? It did, right? Like, first Azeroth was ordered, and then Draenor was ordered by Agramar. So
I'm pretty sure that's how it happened.
So those crystals that are present in Maraudon, I mean, we don't even entirely understand how Maraudon like was just poof formed. We don't know if Theradris like took a segment and barred it off, or if she created what was there necessarily. But those orange and purple crystals are also present in Deepholm, right? So even before the Titans ordered Azeroth, technically those purple and orange crystals probably would have been there when the elemental lords themselves were chilling, right?
Definitely.
Mhm.
I've always found it ironic too for the effects of later on when they actually designed her mother. They took those exact crystals and the glow from that instance and applied it to her makeup and her design, which I found kind of ingenious.
Yeah, I really like her design.
I mean, she's not the prettiest, but it makes sense with her being the way she is to be a stone mother.
It makes an impact on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I wish I knew like where they were drawing their inspiration from for their looks. But with Alakir, like sorry, this is like another tangent, but with the air elementals, you get the genie impression. I wonder if they're kind of going off of the genie feel, honestly, for all of the elemental lords, like Neptulon, Ragnaros. Maybe that's why Therazane and Theradris look the way they do.
Right. Well, a really cool thing about Therazane is if you look back in like ancient actual history in our world, her design comes and represents exactly in like Middle Eastern culture all the way down into Mesopotamia. They used to do little fetishes and idols exactly like her model, and it meant fertility. I mean, like her whole entire design is to a T about fertility and being the stone mother. It's quite ingenious. I absolutely love her design.
Man,
Except her face.
I just noticed this viewer count up at the top is totally busted. Like, there's 0 on YouTube, but then there's all these people in the chat. So
Right?
I'm just gonna turn that off because they're like, apparently this is not wanting to work. Yeah, the Genosaurs. And there's definitely a lot of connections between the flora and fauna of Azeroth and Draenor. And specifically, from what we're told, Freya drew from the dream and drew from Azeroth's power herself to create the flora and fauna. We don't know if Theradris did the same thing in order to populate Maraudon and all of the, flora and fauna within Maraudon, but I would imagine that maybe she did. I would imagine that all of the elemental lords might have been drawing on Azeroth in some capacity to fuel their creations.
Was it I've always imagined the story of her when she sucked all the life and from and making Desolus. I always felt like, have you guys ever seen how they describe a heavy bodily object and how gravity works and flows around it? I feel like she like was like on a trampoline. It all like went and sunk in, and like everything kind of pooled into Maraudon the way it was. I feel like it was like an empty, shellless cave, and then she brought and sucked all that life into it. It's just very weird and ironic how it is. And what do you need that for? On top of it, you're talking to Cho'Gall, you're interlinked with the old gods. Like there's a lot that just doesn't add up with her, and there is some sinister. I feel like there is a sinister side to her.
Well, like
Not just
how does the princess literally create a pocket that Cenarius can't get Zatyr back out of? Like how can a demigod not access this area she's created?
exactly.
And that makes me wonder, like, are there other places like that as well?
where it almost like blocks off the dream's presence and being able to manipulate. Like, it's strange.
Yeah, I mean, we already know that, Egwene can put up Fel wards, the Tauren can put up Old God / Void wards. Like, how has she basically managed to put up, like, wards against the Dream, or something to where when the Dryads enter, they get sick?
Right, and confused and everything. And you obviously have Xavius involved in there too, because satyrs made their way in with the Legion. So it's like she welcomed in this whole nest of old gods and Legion and everything else in between, and the nightmare and the dream. It's this whole accumulation of all these things and locking them in there. And it's like, what?
It's like the worst idea you could possibly have, and then just going through with it.
Right. I mean, because you even have influence from her deep home in there as well too. You've got boars, you've got different worms that are only supposed to be part of deep home itself. So you've got even that going in there. It's so strange. And then on top of it, a Titan vault that's part of it too, which is just like, she had to have been locked away. It's like she had to have been locked away. She wasn't just sleeping. There's something more to it that just hasn't been explained.
There's some reason why she was locked away separately from the rest of them. Like, when as the orderings described, they simply wanted to take all of these primordial beings, split them based on what element they were, and then put them away in a prison into the elemental planes. So why is she different? Like, I feel as though she probably wasn't even put into deep home, simply because the Tauren are able to, like, get her out on their own. She was able to whisper that to them from beneath the earth, whereas none of the other ones could. They didn't actually open up all of deep home. They just specifically let her out of wherever she was. So I feel like that vault, or that Titan area that you're talking about, Vaski, would have had some kind of purpose to it. There is some reason why she was being contained there, and I think that would probably explain why she, like, erupted the way she did when she was freed. Like, the way that we already know that, like, the different powers throughout the entire universe, from the Narrow, the Titans, it seems like they all have to be fueled by something and that they decay, right? So I almost wonder if she was cut off from her fuel, and that's why as soon as she got out, she consumed the whole zone.
The one thing I find interesting about Maraudon, like the one thing that always stood out to me about his design, was it appears to look like Night Elf ruins. When you get to the part with the satyr and the one goblin boss that really doesn't fit in. Like, I don't know anything, so I'm expecting, like, someone to have a bit of knowledge, but it always stood out to me. Like, it was always the bit that was like, why is this here?
There's tree ants and there's imps. Do the satyrs there have imps? I forget. You go in as a warlock. You go and you get your dread steed. You have to get some demon stuff from there or something.
Right.
Yeah, I think there was some imps.
There is imps in there. They're alongside of the satyrs. So you do have the Legion and all of that combined with it for sure. You have basilisks, you have stone giants, you've got, I mean, literally, like, everything's there all collected in one.
Literally your worst nightmares.
Yeah, right?
Thank you for the follows, guys. But yeah, I feel like they definitely are trying to show something with that. The demons aren't just, like, haphazardly in there, but it's specifically in relation to the nightmare, and just in general how the satyrs are involved with the nightmare. But they must have gone in there much after the fact. Like, it seems like it's been a very long time, ever since Zatyr was first stolen, pretty much, that Cenarius has been sending forces in there to try to reclaim him. Like, this has been going on probably for a really long time, that these Dryads have been trying to reclaim him.
Well, what now that you talk about them trying to reclaim him, his own nephew Celebras tried going in there and saving him and getting him out of there and getting his remains out, and he didn't succeed, and he became prey and in that instance, which is really unfortunate. So it's like these dryads trying to go in there and recover him, only to be corrupted and being stuck within there. It's really just, it's this constant process. And then on top of it being a centaur burial ground of the process, you've got so many things happening in this place all at once, and all these questions that still are unanswered. Like, I go in there and I'm just like staring at stuff going, what the fuck? Like, honestly, because it's just like, Jesus Christ, there's just so much going on in there. And you'll see it in there too. Like, you'll see the elemental that's enraged at the front of it. You go down in there, you even see Titan kind of like structures. There's just so much going on, and it makes your head like whip back and forth. Like, I'm getting whiplash from it because there's so much that I want to see in that instance that I feel like it's still getting missed at parts.
Well, that kind of made a light bulb go off in my head. Like, we don't really know the full order of events exactly. You would imagine that while Zaytir was still alive and that he was, happily procreating with Princess Therazane, and they were making the centaurs and things, and who knows what other plans they had, but they wanted to make Maraudon itself lush, and then they wanted to make Desolus itself lush. So they were trying to, make more creatures, you would imagine. And at that point, if I had to take a guess, I'd assume that the nightmare wasn't present there. And I would assume that when he was alive, the dryads probably wouldn't have necessarily gotten sick by entering, because I don't think he would have even, do we even know that he was participating in that he would have wanted to kill like his old brethren? Like, I kind of doubt that. I'm getting the impression now, based on just what you said there, like maybe it was only after he died that the aspect of the dream that had been brought into there, that had been used to fuel the creations, what if that aspect of the dream started turning nightmare and it wasn't really part of Theradras's doing, or it wasn't necessarily like some poison that she had set up to stop the dryads? What if, like, because there's just no fuel for the dream in there and that it's cut off from everything, maybe once he died, it just like started decaying to nightmare,
Like festering, like
yeah.
like a bad sore on you and whatnot. And the thing is though too is he was kind of stuck in the dream, and they say even as Storm Rage himself, when you go and meet him in the book, that he has constant sorrow on his face, and there's supposed bitterness that comes from it, because you do eventually kill the princess because he realizes the error of what he's done. Even though he heeded and had plenty of warning, it was a mistake in the end in his eyes. Like, it should have never happened.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously when you first go into Maraudon, there's all this noxious stuff. There's like pestilent stuff, just like you said. Like, everything kind of looks fleshy and poisonous, and it's the aspect of nature that's more void related, I would say. Obviously because of the nightmares influence. That's why there's demons and stuff in there. I feel like obviously those satyrs, the satyr boss that we see, like, I don't think those existed when Maraudon was created. Like, satyrs date back to the War of the Ancients. I would imagine that Maraudon is older than the War of the Ancients. So those satyrs came in after the fact. I would imagine they came in after Zaytir died, and that they're kind of manipulating themselves. They're probably manipulating whatever aspect of the dream was, maybe manipulating the dream through that connection.
Right. I'll agree with you on that one for sure.
So maybe it wasn't really all of Theradras's doing, that all of that nightmare stuff. Like, she seems so, I mean, her life is kind of sad, right? And after he dies, I mean, you'd think that she would probably be able to just kill those demons. And like, do you think she really wants the start of Maraudon, where all those dryads are dying? Do you think she really wants it to be like this toxic pool with like all these little slime and like maggots and stuff? Like, I get the impression that her little area is the beautiful part, because that's where she's chilling out, and like, she probably has just let the rest fall into neglect.
Well, that's the thing is too. She even states it to Cho'Gall that she sincerely loved him. Like, she knew that possibly that he might be only liking the life essence that's within her, but she truly actually did love him, and that's why she put him there, because she didn't want to even leave him, even with like his spirit there and whatnot. Like, she enshrined him basically in that area, and it's gorgeous in her area. Everything beyond that is just disgusting, and I think she did completely let it go to utter shit, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, and because his corpse is up there, I feel like whatever dream powers that he had over the rest of the place is probably falling to corruption, like around the outskirts, falling to nightmare, just because, like, he's deep within. So the satyrs who are going in there are able to prey off of that, and who knows if they're I'd imagine they're trying to find some weakness in the dream or something through that and just use it to their own ends.
Well, if you've noticed too, if you go into the Thermok area where she's enshrined him, there's no centaurs. She's literally pushed them out to the edges of that, and the rest is like a burial ground and has just been, like you said, let go. I mean, her own children aren't even in there. All that matters is her husband. She even liked Remulos's dryads and all that. She found it just amazing and gorgeous, and like, it's even stated that she wanted to bring life back to Desolace. Like, that was the end goal. But granted, she was still with the old gods, but remember, there is that theory with spore mounds and everything with the Emerald Dream that it's connected with the old gods, especially with the fauna. And once again, earlier I linked a link. Etch has this really cool theory about these spore mounds and how they've gone and how they are like old gods and how they've affected the world and transferred through. So I mean, it's definitely a really cool thing to look at, because this kind of ties in with everything, and it's really cool. So yeah, I'm like, won't spoil anything. You definitely have to go watch this video, because it's very, like, it blew my mind. But yeah, Rin, what do you think so far on it? Do you think like there's do you think the old gods still have an influence and driving the dream and everything in that place? Do you think she's blocking off her own children into the whole entire tomb itself? Like, what's your stance on this so far?
I don't think the old gods would have at least as strong as a connection as they would, purely because there's so much aid going in that there might be a ward to block them off at this stage. But then whatever's there is still going to be there, and that mightn't even kill what's already there. But the whole blocking out the children thing, I don't understand it in a way, but I do in another. Like, it seems like she has this obsession with preserving what she had around her, and then she just forgets the rest of it is falling to pieces. Right. But as long as she has what's around her in perfect
right. Order. Well, she was very mad at her children, because their original 5 children that made up the 5 clans are the one that killed Zaytar. So she was devastated over that. So
yeah, she's kind of holding a grudge. Now, see, that makes more sense to me. Honestly, I think it's that whole thing about truly loving him and just wanting that preservation, like being able to just like pretend that there is still a chance deep down that there will be life brought back to wherever she wants to bring it to, Desolace, Maraudon. But I feel like there's so much sadness going on within her. The whatever it is, the old gods or whoever, because we don't know if there's anything else underlying in there, because there's literally everything in there. So we don't know if there's anything else underlying underneath all this stuff with the old gods legion. worms and blobs. We don't know what else is there. So whatever is actually playing at her emotions, it's doing it really well. And there's probably something gonna link us back to it. I don't know. I always have this thought if like it's just gonna come back. It's gonna come back someday. It's gonna come back to haunt us.
Right. Well, the thing is, now that Shirviu's talking about it, of like how the other two areas were completely gross and like one was like perfect. Well, think about the names. One side's called Wicked Grotto. The other one's Foul Spore Cavern. Wicked Grotto, like nightmare. Foul Spore, like spore mounds going into Old Gods. And then you've got the one, Earth Song Falls. How pretty is that? Going into the final resting point. Those
Yeah.
are really key points of like really telling the story of like what each area is and what they represent.
Yeah, I would imagine that the entire place was probably like Earthsong Falls before Zatyr died. But
Right.
now I honestly wonder, do you guys think that the story of the centaur killing him because they were just angry, like, does that really make sense to you guys? Because I'm honestly wondering if the old gods manipulated them. They seem like the essence of the curse of flesh. I'm not trying to say they were cursed. I think that they just came out that way. But I wonder if, I mean, we already see the presence of the satyrs in there, and the satyrs are working with the Legion in conjunction with the old gods. So wouldn't it make sense that if they have satyrs in there now, that they may potentially have been aware of the whole situation from the start and could have perhaps caused the jealousy within the brothers and pinned, like, it's exactly what the old gods would want, for Theradress's forces to be battling with Cenarius's forces and for them to not get along, because that's exactly what the old gods do.
Right, exactly. And you're taking these two things that could have made something so, like, if you realize it, Earth Elemental and a Grove Keeper coming together that are two parts and like coming from descendants from Malorn and like this whole entire earthly thing. It literally, like, centaurs should have been the perfect race if you really think about it. Those coming together, the elemental plane and the Emerald Dream, like, in my opinion, I think that's incredible. But it ended up being this corrupted thing, and they came out in this disgusting way. And even Zatar looked disgusted on his own kids, and that like destroyed and angered the kids and made them murder him in the most brutal way. They say they brutally murdered him and just ripped him to shreds. And then they went on a rampage across Azeroth wanting to get rid of all life. That's like an epiphany of like an old god's tale, like of just getting two things together and then messing it all up.
Where did the bloodthirst come from, really? That's what I'm saying. Because, like, Theradress doesn't act like that. She was remorseful that she sucked all the life out of Desolus. She was
Right.
horrified that she woke up and that's what happened. When she was whispering to the Torn, she didn't have them do any kind of weird bloodthirsty bidding of hers, like, not to our knowledge. Zatyr himself wouldn't have wanted them to be bloodthirsty. So when the two of them created the Centaur, why are the Centaur this way? It's almost like, I mean, I know that they're like the sinful children and whatnot, but I'm not necessarily saying that they're cursed, but I feel like the old gods must have been talking to them or manipulating their society in some capacity. I mean, when you just quest around the area, when you interact with the centaur, you already get that vibe.
Right. Well, okay, now think of it this way. You have the Stone Mother, the Stone Mother's daughter. They were originally equestered in with the old gods. What if in her womb with these children, Nazath or whatever old god was whispering to them and corrupting them because she's made of stone and she's part of the earth? Like, what, like, it was like a doomed thing from the start.
That's actually a really good point, because when the old gods first came to Azeroth, they enslaved the elemental lords, and they managed to take complete control during the time of the Black Empire they took control of all of these creations of the elemental lords, right? And once they had subdued them and had control over everything, the elemental lords would do their bidding, and they would war with each other on behalf of the old gods. Now, fast forward to with Theradress, simply because all of these creatures that she's making are of the earth, perhaps that they were already susceptible to N'Zoth, being, you know, that he is the Whisperer from the earth, he's the Corruptor from the earth. Maybe Zaytir himself is kind of free of it, being, you know, so related to Cenarius and so entwined with the dream. And maybe Theradris, through in some capacity, I mean, the current elemental lords aren't enslaved by the old gods, they do have their own will. So she was probably fine as well. And, you know, her natural affinity to the earth perhaps allowed her to not be corrupted by N'Zoth, but that doesn't mean that their children were as lucky, right? Like maybe just from the sheer fact that they're of the earth and of the dream, they're both so susceptible to corruption. Maybe they didn't have enough to fight off that old god influence.
Right.
Because they kill their father and they upset their mother, and they're not exactly friends with each other. There are these 5 warring clans. They're hated by the Torn. They pretty much hate everyone. They're just screwing over everyone. Like, it doesn't make sense really that's how the situation would have just turned out of its own.
And then on top of it, they screw over themselves and fight amongst each other. That's literally taking something that could have been sheer perfection in a, like, because if you really think about it, with being born the way they were and they were untouched by old gods, they literally could be the perfect flesh race. Easily, but for some reason they came out as malformed children, so they had to have been messed with in the womb.
I mean, on top of that, I'm kind of forgetting the quests like from vanilla, but wasn't the whole point of you allying yourself with one of them, and then they're sending you on these missions to attack their brethren? Weren't the different clans kind of dying out in a way, or they were actually struggling? It's like the fact that they were all warring with each other was making their numbers thin, and that they were, you know, not doing well as a society overall, right?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, it does sound like an old god tale. It reminds me of the disparate human tribes, reminds you of the disparate troll tribes, reminds you of like pretty much every single time in lore we have these different, you know, organizations of the same species who are warring with each other because of the old gods, right? And it all
Right.
comes full circle. It's usually the ordered creatures and the creatures who are following, like, let's say, druidism and such, that get along and that they kind of further society in a way. And you were mentioning earlier, Vaski, how only the female centaurs are able to use shamanism, right? And how
Yeah,
they're kind of
that's
similar
it.
to the harpies.
Correct. Right.
The harpies are like another race that you can kind of throw in there. I mean, when you're talking about the perfect harmony between like the dream and the elements, I feel like the harpies go pretty well in there. And for some reason, the centaurs definitely didn't turn out as nice as them.
Right. Especially, I think, luckily they had Avena in the whole process of it, but like they, if there was none of that all in between, and there was none of, like, I feel like there was something missed when they were, oh hey Lhok, nice point, 5 old gods, 5 centaur clans. Oh god, that would be messed up if like one of them each had their own kind of thing. But it's really ironic because the game does play on five things. They really like the number 5. But yeah, it's just, there's just so much going on, and Aviana has, like, granted, harpies do have their own problems in some areas. Some of them are pretty crazy and pretty gross. And you get hags out of it too, which are going to be showing up in BFA. But like, they got the better end of the stick of things compared to the centaur. Like, the centaur really could have been a force to reckon with, and not in like a bad way, in like a good way for all of Azeroth. I mean, you even got centaur with Sundering. There was centaur even on the Eastern Kingdoms, but you don't see anything of that other than being pelts and on orc things now. Over on the Eastern Kingdoms, because like the only thing that you hear about is that they were mercenaries in some levels of the war, and you don't see anything about them after the third war. They're like wiped out on the Eastern Kingdoms of whatever was left there. So I find that really interesting. And also, the Tauren would have been completely extinct if the orcs didn't invade Azeroth. I find that ironic as well, too.
Well, now that you mention it, like pretty much all of the shamanic cultures have clans. They tend to have a clan system. And they usually have like a chieftain or something. In the case of the centaurs, we have the Khan system. And we don't see that anywhere else throughout all of WoW, I'm pretty sure.
I think like the Taurens have a system where they have like chieftains too, but like these guys really actually have like Khans. So they've got like a Mongolian thing too. And Lhok even said it earlier in the chat that they like all the way down to Princess, you'll see that she, and for her whole entire design, it has a Japanese Mongolian kind of feel to it. Like it's got this Kazakh, I can't say it right, Kazakh kind of feel to it. All of that, we're going into Mongolia and then into Japan. So you've got those mix of different cultures in there, and it completely ties over into the rest of that.
That reminds me, again, back to what Rin was saying about the Yongle, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Netch said it, too, in the chat. Okay, well, I don't know if you guys, did you have any more points about Maraudon, or did you want to go into the intermission?
I'm pretty good. I think we've covered everything down to the crystals, the different wings. Like I think we've covered ideas of what we've been interested about and speculating about.
Yeah, hopefully that got you guys thinking, like next time you're in Maraudon, that you're like really looking and inspecting things. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Rin?
No, I'm fine. I have no other points. Yeah, no. I still want to know what those night elf ferns are.
Same.
Okay, well we're gonna go into intermission. It's gonna be, you know, about 15 minutes-ish long, and then we'll come back and we're gonna talk about the elemental lords for another hour. So hopefully you guys will stick around for that. We'll see you in a minute.
we are going to start heading into our topic about the elemental lords, definitely from the original time, with them warring all the way to current, with what's going on in Legion and possibly so forth of what's going to come in BFA. So we're gonna first hit it off with the one and only absolute big old badass is Ragnaros. So most of you guys know.
Oh, Vaski, I think you just cut out.
Did I? Ooh,
oh, yeah.
My bad. Yeah. Hello. Okay, so he ultimately, we're gonna cover Ragnaros. I don't know if you guys missed that or not. That's gonna be our first big bad boy that we're going to cover. Most of you guys know, if you're into the elemental lords, that he was summoned in by Therazane in Blackrock Mountain, which resulted in the blasts that happened in that whole entire area. His plane is Firelands, and he has been a chaotic force in the whole entire run of things since it stands. We do have a new Fire Lord now besides Ragnaros with his untimely death, and we'll cover a little bit of him with the Shaman hub for Legion and all that. But let's go ahead and head into that. Oh, also, really cool thing is Ragnaros and Alakir teamed up in Cataclysm big time to initiate the Hour of Twilight. A lot of people, it kind of got missed and convoluted in Cataclysm, but it's really interesting how out of all of them, those are the two chaotics that teamed up. So let's dive into Ragnaros. Sure, what do you like about him, or don't like about him?
Well, he's kind of the first elemental lord you ever get really super introduced to in the game. I don't think we see Neptulon at all in vanilla. We don't really see any of them at all except for Ragnaros in vanilla, but we do at least hear about, you know, is it Thunderaan we hear about, or
Thunderaan is Alakir's son.
So is it him that we're hearing about, like, warring with Ragnaros, and that Ragnaros like imprisons him in the blades or something?
I believe so. That one completely, like, that whole story completely misses me with that, because I never really paid attention to Thunderaan and whatnot. I just wanted the damn shiny weapon, to be honest with that back then.
Well, we've got Demetrian, the human, and I'm using air quotes, guy in Silithus, who basically starts you on that whole legendary artifact, well, legendary weapon quest, right? And he's basically trying to tell you the story of how back in his day, his masters ruled over the world, who are the elemental lords, and that, yeah, what Lhok is saying there, that Thunderaan was placed into a sword, that was by Ragnaros's minions, though, right?
Right.
So it's, I find it interesting how what you're saying, Vaski, that they teamed up, specifically the Air and Fire Lords team up in Cataclysm, when we already have this story from vanilla that previously they had been kind of always out to get each other.
Right, exactly. They all kind of at a point were not in good standing with each other, because you had Neptulon, which was non-chaotic. He was technically pretty chill. You've got Therazane, who was chaotic, neutral, didn't know what she wanted, even though she was an old god lieutenant. But Ragnaros and Alakir were those true chaotic ones. They wanted to see the Hour of Twilight. They wanted the undoing. Ultimately being upset at each other, but then in the end teaming up and wanting to see the Hour of Twilight and the world break so they can usher in their own plane. Yeah, too soon, executives.
So is it actually explained in Cataclysm? Because I didn't play the entire duration of Cataclysm. I quit before Cata came out, and I did not resub until the end of Pandaria. So was it actually explained that the reason why Ragnaros was working with them and has these Twilight cultists working with him and everything, is that because the Hour of Twilight would reset or rid the separation between the physical plane and the elemental planes, would it have all become one in the Hour of Twilight? Was that kind of his motivation, or do we not necessarily get that side of the story fully?
You don't get 100% of that. They mostly do it because they're delusional in the fact that they think, oh, if the old gods come into play, we have our elemental plane. But if you really think about it, they originally were subdued by the old gods. So they're in this weird limbo of like, we're going to get power, but we're not, is what I understood, is that they were okay with that as long as mortals just got snuffed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it wasn't so great being ruled over by the Black Empire, but was it any worse than being imprisoned? You know what I mean? Like, according to Demetrian's dialogue in Silithus, he kind of calls the Titans the Makers. He calls them usurpers. They ended the rule of the world's original owners, and I feel like even though the Black Empire are bad news for the Elementals, ultimately the Titans are worse news because the Titans literally put them in a prison.
Right, exactly. So it's like technically like flipping a coin at this point for them, and taking a last final stand of what can be done, which, you know, if they weren't so chaotic, I feel like they could have, like, for instance, you've got Neptulon and you got Therazane, and now they're on our side and we're helping them within their plane, which you're getting that now down in Legion when it comes to teaming up all the elementals to go towards fighting the Legion. But it's just like, you had to go through all of that to finally just get usurped, pass away, and only to have remnants of your clan to basically step forth and take the better route on things.
Yeah, I feel like they probably are working with the old gods because what other choice do they have? No one else is going to
Exactly.
help them. Yeah, exactly. So they're both in prison. They were both kind of screwed over by the Titans. If they have a common enemy, maybe they can work together. And although in the end the old gods don't care about the elemental lords, they probably just want to enslave them all over again. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's kind of at least making some progress, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
But do the elemental lords, like, does Ragnaros even fully understand what the Hour of Twilight entails? He's specifically the one who was part of behind that whole plan to like burn Hyjal, was he not?
Yes, he was completely like, that was why his hub like came into light and it popped up there. He was ready to just go on war and completely destroy Hyjal.
So
And if we didn't intervene, he would have succeeded. He got very close to the tree.
do we have a good explanation for that entire thing? Why does he say he wants to burn Hyjal? I mean, I know Thrall has this dream and this vision that burning Hyjal brings the Hour of Twilight, but why? Is Hyjal somehow necessary in the prisons remaining how they are? I mean, Hyjal was grown after Gahanir was destroyed during the War of the Ancients, so it's like relatively new. I'm just wondering, like, what does the dream overall, what kind of impact would that even have on the elemental lords in their prisons? Why would they be concerned with that?
Right. I don't know. That one's a hard one for me to like come to a conclusion on, because the all the elemental lords are an enigma. Like, we have a lot of story on them, but like they're still, it's like you're getting really deep into speculation on them, and it's just like, I feel like they're still, even with them teaming up with the shamans now, for defeating the Legion, I still think that they have old god influence. I feel like Therazane in a drop of a dime, if the old gods came into light, just like the Mantid said that they would go right back to Yasiraj if he came back. I feel like Therazane would be like, yeah, sure, no problem, I'll be a lieutenant again. Hey, you know?
Yeah,
I
I
think,
wouldn't put it past her. I mean, she has no reason to care about the Titan creations, that's for sure, after how Cenarius treated her daughter and all of that.
right, exactly. I know that it's just, I feel like it's very up in the air for them. They can just drop. The only one that I would see that wouldn't would be, for instance, Neptulon. Just like Golden Ash says on there that like he pops up, and Mr. Drake even says too that the quest over on the Broken Shore, he has one of his own followers helps you take out the Legion. Like he has a huge part. He really shows up in your quest line in the shaman area. You get a hold of the Doomstone. He has all of this, but I still find it so strange because he got taken by Azamat, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm okay. I didn't crack and get got shit on me. It's the basic point I can put. It's just like, what? Huh? What? Excuse me?
Well, Neptulon specifically, okay, so we have Ragnaros the Fire Lord, right? So he's part of the Firelands. He was basically killed in Cataclysm, so we have Smolderon now taking, his
Correct.
place. Neptulon was the water elemental lord of water, so he's part of the Abyssal Maw. And I think that's why his plot thread was introduced in Cataclysm, because Cataclysm was supposed to be, supposedly, the expansion that would introduce N'Zoth in some capacity, because N'Zoth was Deathwing's master. N'Zoth was like his main manipulator, and so Neptulon being, so heavily linked with the elemental plane, with water, the Naga, Ajara, N'Zoth, of course, it was all part of the same kind of storyline. So I feel like that's kind of why he was introduced, and then all of a sudden his story was almost dropped into Legion.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a direct result, for unfortunate not releasing the Abyssal Maw raid and cutting corners in Cataclysm, which I think was a super injustice, because you build up this whole entire thing with Ajara and Azumat and taking Neptulon, and people are like, no, I was just getting interested in this character, you finally introduced him to us, only to be just taken away, and we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs going, where's more of the story on this guy? He's pretty cool. We actually have an elemental lord that's on our side. Okay, I need to know more, but here we are, and he just all of a sudden, literally, and it's the funniest thing ever, I started laughing my butt off in Legion when he just pops up and he's like, hey, what's up? I'm here. I got you. I'm like, what? Why? Like, why
I
are
mean,
you
the last
here?
time we saw him was in Throne of the Tides. I remember this so vividly because I wanted to know so much about that guy. I was after getting up to like 80. I was after power leveling. I was just after joining the game. I was so hyped. I was like, oh my god, who is this guy? And then all of a sudden he just gets whisked away by the Kraken guy, Azamat. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll find out more about him. And then you find out that the Abyssal Maw raid was like scrapped, and you're like, well, oh my god,
Yeah.
that's probably where the story was meant to go. So then eventually, like Warlords of Draenor and parts of Legion, I was like, will I see him? Will I see him? Will I hear about it? And you're there and you see like Val'sharah and stuff, and you're like, there's water, will I hear about it? And then all of a sudden, out of everywhere he could have popped out of with the most, not even an excuse. There's not even an excuse. He just pops up and he's just like, hey, I'm here now. And you're just like, but I have so many questions to ask, and it's you don't even get the option. It's like, what the hell are they hiding? Like, are they actually going to tell us what happened, or do we just have to continue saying it was scrapped? Like, it seems really lazy to just have to keep saying it was scrapped.
I mean, on an art standpoint, like, since we're kind of like not exactly on a lore standpoint regarding that, I mean, when it comes to content like that, you kind of do have to admit it that you do cut corners, and it's something that was just not working for where they were going in a direction. Unfortunately, I think it's disjustice, because it was a giant tease to me, because I'm like, huh, an elemental lord, or that's like, once again, on our side. It's like, come on, I need to know more about this guy. And it's still like, you don't get a whole lot about it in Legion, in your shaman area. I'm just like, I literally was just like, okay, great, cool, he keeps popping up and is like, get a Doomstone, and it's just like, cool. So I mean, I hope they do something with it, like, even with like the Loa and BFA, I really hope he comes into terms, because the water is getting messed with in BFA. You've got water Loa, they're getting desecrated. I really hope with Ajara coming in the line that he has a play in this and he's helping defending his own waters. Like, please, dude, for the love of God.
Yeah, I mean, Ajara's got to have it out for Neptulon. She doesn't have him working for her, then she's got to get rid of him, I feel. Like, she's got to have
Exactly.
some kind of control over the situation because she wants control over all of the waters, like, point blank. So he's probably will, I would say, be part of that story arc with Ajara. But, you know, before, in terms of the cut content, um, the expansions had been pretty cookie cutter up to that point. Like, you have, you know, certain amount of threats, usually with old underlying old god influences, which aren't brought to the forefront, and then you end up fighting an old god at the end. And I feel like Cataclysm was supposed to be the here's all of N'Zoth's lieutenants, and then tease N'Zoth, and then perhaps the expansion after Kata logically would have been the Ajara expansion, because at least at the time, when people would think of, oh, what storylines are left? Like, what could the next expansion be? Like, an Ajara and Emerald Dream related expansion was always something people would talk about. And I feel like with the introduction of N'Zoth through Deathwing and the whole War of the Ancients history and all of that, it would have been a logical progression to then talk about the Dream, the Abyssal Maw, and we never saw any of that. Instead, we got the Legion first. I mean, Wad and Pandaria really could have come at any point. They weren't really chronological, right? But
Exactly.
for us to be doing the Legion now and then going to fight Ajara, I don't think anyone would have suspected it to happen in that order.
No, you would think Ajara would come first, but if you really think about it, Ajara, it can be rivaled even more though than old gods. Like, she's created by him, but she's evolved it too. So it's just like, my god. And sorry if you guys could hear the going by, but it's just, it's crazy, like, to think that, like, it's just, there's just so much more that's going to come of it. And I really felt like Ajara should have been first, but guess now that's not what Blizzard wants, because, you know.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with it, but maybe they are going to kind of extend the story by drawing a bit more on the elemental lords, because we got a bit of a touch of it in Cataclysm where we had, you know, a little bit of everything, but it was such a surface level introduction. Therazane and Alakir didn't really do much. Now we have Thunderaan, who I don't play a shaman, but what exactly have Smolderon and Thunderaan really done to influence the story? Like, how much have we seen?
It was a very small, like, hub quest line for you to basically empower your weapon and bring these realms back, because so with Alakir gone and Ragnaros gone, you're going into these planes and there has to be a new lord, or else the plane is just in an uproar, it's in chaos, there's other air elementals fighting each other, all these things, and you're going there and you're recruiting the most likely candidate, and it's almost like a debate amongst the elementals. And what's his name, Thunderaan, gets picked for it. And it blows my mind is like, why couldn't Alakir and why couldn't Ragnaros come to terms like these other ones? Like, Smolderon was proud and accepted the title and went on to it. Granted, he's not epic and leg boy like and swole like Ragnaros is, but he has a head on his shoulders that makes sense to what the story is. And it's the same thing with Thunderaan. He takes the sword proudly, he steps up into the role, and they both understand that the Legion is a threat to them itself in their own plane, and that they need to take the bull by the horns and team up as all the planes together with your shamans and going forth to go after the Legion. Now, it doesn't go into super detail of it, unfortunately. I wish they did a little bit more with it, because now all you have is these planes that are, you can go into at any point to see them, but they aren't. He has legs, Grix. Don't get me going, man. But yeah, it just, it's these stories that could have really unfolded, and it only touched the surface for the shaman campaign.
The way they select their leaders kind of reminds me of the dragon aspects. Like the blue dragons. Like, it's not exactly like they get to choose them, but they did end up having a debate with the newest one.
Wait, say that again, Ren?
The newest blue dragon aspect. What's his name? The guy with the blue
Calicos.
hair. Calicos.
Yeah, Caligos, yeah.
Yeah. They ended up having like a debate over who should get it, right? Because there was like this other dragon. I don't know his name. But
Was there a
when you
debate? I
do
can't remember.
Yeah, there was like a whole debate, and then they ended up having to wait for like the moon phenomenon, and then that like selected the official dragon aspect because they did it because that's when the like proper aspects were chosen and all that stuff. But then yeah, there was like this other guy, and I don't know, it just reminded me of that. You see it when you're doing the Terragosa's staff quest, because you have to relive it through her eyes.
Right. Are you talking about when you have to go on the staff and you fight Smolderon, basically? Are you talking about that part of the quest? I'm lost here now.
No. I'm talking about ages ago. Like, the actual staff quest, like, when you're, like, getting it.
You know the dragon Tarkigosa?
Yep. Yep, Shirv gets it.
Yeah, so basically, there's like this parallel between the selection of the new blue dragon aspect Caligos versus the selection of a new elemental lord.
Yeah, that exactly.
Yeah, so in Legion, there's 2 new elemental lords that have to be picked, or else like the whole entire plane goes into chaos. Did you play the shaman campaign for the mount and everything, and your weapon?
I don't play shaman.
Yeah, I've never played. I don't play a shaman.
I played paladin all throughout Legion, and like some mage and some death knight, like basically everything but shaman.
Gotcha. I mean, it was really. I think that they could have really expanded upon it, but I think they like once again there was cut areas because you've got this whole build up to it and them taking it over, but they literally just stand outside there and are like, "I'm here for you for the Legion. Let's snuff them out." Like, and I was just like, "Oh boy, here we go." Like, and I'm expecting something super epic out of it, but I kind of got let down, and then I get a mount out of it as well too, and I'm just like, and I can't pick the colors between my class. Rip. But if I don't want a blue water elemental with my healing one, what if I want the red one with my transmog? Too bad for that. Rip me and my little tiny little things of what I want in this game. Oh well. But
sad times.
Yeah, sad times. But I mean, I don't know. It was a cool quest, but at the same time, like everything kind of meshed in and like melded in, and by the end of it I was like sitting there blank faced, like blinking my eyes going, what happened? I'm not gonna lie, like it was kind of a convoluted thing.
Well, I don't know. I feel like we're probably going to get more lore on that like in the distant future. But what I'm expecting for Battle for Azeroth, I mean, we're getting a new elemental language.
Yes.
And a lot of the little elemental minions are getting updated models. So they're clearly going to be bringing something of that into the forefront. And with all the trees burning, like Hour of Twilight coming back into the picture, I'm just wondering like what exact connection the elemental lords have to that. Because like I'm not sure, are you guys familiar with how the elemental planes were created? It's never explained in actual WoW lore, like officially, like through the game or through books or anything, but it is explained in the RPG manual.
Are you talking about where they all kind of like convolute in like something with spirit? I forget what it is. It's like spirit gets sucked away or something like that.
Well,
Is that what you're talking about?
No, actually the RPG manual explains that during the ordering of Azeroth, the Titans actually create a separate planet. And this separate planet has 3 tiers to it, and that's the elemental planes. It's a planet, it has its own fake sun, like, and so the top tier is the elemental plane of air, Skyhold. The middle plane, the middle tier is both the abyssal maw for water and deep home for the earth. And then at the bottom, then there's Firelands, the elemental plane of fire, and it's actually like a sphere.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I did not know about that because for some reason, the way I read it, I always remembered that it's like in a coordinates of like a blip alongside the same, not the same, but like butt to butt with the dream. That's what I always seen it as. So that's interesting how the RPG manual describes that. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I do also think that it's probably side to side with the dream, because I would imagine that these pocket realm planets are all existing within the Nether, like the dream, the Shadowlands, the elemental planes. But I mean, we don't know, of course, if the RPG lore is still relevant or if they're still going with that story. But until they tell us otherwise, we literally have nothing to go off. So at least it's still telling. You know, when they wrote World of Warcraft, when they wrote Vanilla and how the elemental lords all interacted, at that point they were basing a lot of it off of the RPG lore. So it's at least relevant to understand that this is what they were thinking when they, did their first pass of the game lore. And things may have changed since that point, but for them all to be like part of one planet, basically, like one realm that's all segmented off, is really interesting.
Right. I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent here. What do you guys think in BFA? We've got the Sethrak coming into light. And what really has been interesting me is like, are the elementals going to get involved with them? Because what they're doing, they're manipulating lightning and they're taking earth and they're manipulating and creating structures out of it.
Right.
So what do you guys think of that? Do you think the elementals will get involved with that too? I mean, because there's a whole lot of things that are going on, not just Titan things, not just blood trolls. I mean, this is another expansion where it's like Maraudon, where everything's coalescing into one. It's kind of crazy how this expansion's unfolding. Literally, everything's kind of coming together and becoming this giant heap of craziness. I don't know if like you guys have been seeing that. I don't know if you guys play beta and whatnot, but I just see everything kind of merging in and I'm just like, oh God.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we discussed before, Cataclysm was the elemental X pack, and it was supposed to introduce N'Zoth and Azshara. And now that we're actually going to see N'Zoth and Azshara, I would imagine that the elementals are part of that storyline in some capacity. I mean, it was obviously going to be tied in to the same thing, so I don't know where they fit in yet. I'm not sure if we're going to get the full explanation come BFA, but we're at least going to get like little subplots and little hints of it and little threads, because I'm not sure even that we're going to completely deal with N'Zoth in BFA. That might be, the X pack after if Azshara ends up, carrying out most of the X pack. I mean, the first raid doesn't even have Azshara, so I feel like she might be more of the big bad and N'Zoth kind of in the background. But we're dealing with this whole Anduin story, Sylvanas story. I would imagine I don't expect the elements to like totally be at the forefront because I don't think Blizzard also necessarily wants to be like Cataclysm 2.0, like N'Zoth, dragons, and elementals again.
Right. It's definitely going to get interesting in BFA because just literally everything's gonna come together. The writing is getting more interesting and it's going to be funny how all these pivotal characters are really going to technically become one in this giant I hate to say it, PvP expansion. It's all about PvP.
As for what Golden Ash was kind of saying in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, hell yeah, either completely like makes the elemental planes. Yeah, I mean, Chronicle is known for kind of being vague in some situations. So we don't know if she created them from nothing or if she created them from something that was there. We don't entirely know, but the RPG lore is also quite vague in that all we know is like the Titans did it, but oftentimes in old lore when the Titans are mentioned, that's like an umbrella term for like any of the Titan minions could have been involved in this, right? It's like, you know, a
Right.
very general. It doesn't mean that the pantheon literally sat there and did it. So when Helia was actually making all of this during the ordering, the pantheon was there. They were present when, you know, while the ordering was going on. And Helia was specifically the one Titan Forged sorceress who went around with Radan and imprisoned everything and, like, you know, split everything up, put them in their proper jail cells, right? In terms of the elemental planes. But that doesn't mean that they've necessarily gone away from the idea of them being all on one planet. Could still be a thing. But what's really fascinating to me is that Helia herself is kind of has her own pocket dimension there in Helheim. And Odin as well kind of has his own pocket dimension in Skyhold. Or is it Skyhold or Skywall? I always get the two confused. It's Skyhold, the warrior place.
Skyhold.
Yeah, so Sky Wall is the elemental plane of air, and their names are so similar. It honestly makes me think that considering how him and Helia had been a team prior to the betrayal, I wonder if the Halls of Valor, in some capacity, are like partially in Skywall, and that would explain why it's called Skyhold. It would explain why there's like these golden clouds all around it, and you can't really see far, like it's its own little place. Because it's the same in Alakir's realm. It's like all these golden clouds that are like separating it off. But if that's the case, when you see how Helheim is literally directly beneath the Halls of Valor, when you defeat Helia, the sky like opens up, right? And the Halls of Valor are literally right above. So by that logic, if that is the Abyssal Maw with Skywall above it, it goes into the whole idea of it being on one planet.
Which would be pretty incredible. And what if that interlinks, if you see in like Ulduar and whatnot, some of those planets that we've wondered what the heck are they could be just templates, just like the Dream is, all these other things that have been worked to make a planet. Like it's these own little templates that surround it and interlink themselves like little threads.
Yeah, and another thing is in the RPG how it mentions the way that this planet was made, right? It also mentions, for some reason, this is totally out of left field, it makes a point to discuss that, sure, we have, you know, in the elemental planes, Deep Home, obviously that cavernous area that we've seen in game, that's not the entirety of the elemental plane of Earth. Like, there is it's basically the entire center of the planet where there's no water, these elemental plane planets. So we've got Deep Home is like this one land mass, if you will. And then everything around it is the Abyssal Maw, all water. And specifically as far away from Deep Home as possible, like on the complete opposite end of the planet, as long a distance as possible within the Abyssal Maw, there's this frozen, there's this like piece of ice. It's almost like you'd think a North Pole, and it's technically part of the Abyssal Maw because it's water, it's frozen water, but it's also a landmass in a way. So it's this very strange area that we've never heard anything of. We don't know how that could be relevant. Why are they mentioning that? But it's, you know, very clearly defined in the RPG manual, and I've always wondered, like, I wonder if we'll see that coming up. I wonder if that's relevant in any capacity. We have a little nod to it, I've always thought, with the Midsummer Fire Festival, how we have Frost Lord Ahun. I've always kind of wondered, like, is there some segment of Frost within the Abyssal Maw that's like a little bit separate?
I would think so, like almost like subsect elemental lords, like almost like hybrid ones that are in between.
Yeah, because you see Ragnaros and he uses a lot of smoke screens and smog, and like he uses kind of all aspects of fire. But with Neptulon, we've only really seen him with water. And obviously water can be steam, it can be um, you know, frost.
Right. And if we're going to talk about elemental planes too, even on Draenor, we've even got Murmur that's involved, which is a weird in subsect of like sound barriers and air. It like, so, I mean, it definitely doesn't rule out that there's other planes of like hybrid in between of these planes, which is really fascinating in itself. I would love for them to dive more into that. Honestly, I would love an expansion that goes into like the elemental plane. Let's be real here. Just like for like a whole expansion that is the original template for Azeroth doing the Emerald Dream. Like that stuff is really cool, and they could literally there's just so much you can go with it and make a whole entire expansion out of those things, because it's so open to the fact of endless possibilities.
Well, as I mentioned with that planet that they supposedly made, how they had an artificial sun lighting it up. For this frost thing to exist way over in the back as far from Deep Home as possible, that technically means it's as far away from the light as possible. And we've always seen throughout WoW that frost is always threaded with shadow. So I've also wondered if that could be some place for the void or for old gods or some weakness within the elemental plane. And it would be really neat if maybe we got into the Abyssal Maw through something that the Lich King would do, or something to do with Shadow and Frost. Even I don't know if Kel'Thuzad's coming back, but if he did something like that, or Helya, I just think that would be a really cool way to introduce it. It would be unexpected, because when you think of the Abyssal Maw, you think of like Neptulon just letting you into some like mermaid palace or something, and there might be more to it than that.
Right. I always thought of like, for instance, like the Dream, like Neptulon's area is like nothing but like fauna and undergrowth, just like the Dream would be, but undersea. Like, and you do see that in his place where it's really golden. You do get kind of Titan aspect out of it too, which really weirds me out of this place. But just going further into the Abyssal Maw and just having this teeming amount of life in that area. But you see in the template, it really wasn't that. It was going after something completely else and dark and sinister, because you have old ones that were originally a template that was in there. But I don't know. I wish they would elaborate on that more, because I'm not gonna lie. I'm one of those people that actually enjoyed the underwater areas, guys. I didn't mind it.
I'm sure we will. At least with Ajara, we're bound to see stuff about Neptulon. We might see a little. I'm hoping we see a little bit more about the airplane, because we saw barely any of it. It was crappy. What we saw of it in. I was a glorified boss room in Cataclysm, and considering my theory about Odin's little Halls of Valor zone Skyhold being within Skywall, if they're tying the Abyssal Maw and Skywall into the story through Odin and Helya, I could see that. I think that would be a really neat way of doing it, and maybe even the dragons could be involved in that somehow.
Definitely, I 100% agree. I think it would be cool, because if you really think about it, just as you pointed out, is they all can be interlinked and be a bubble within themselves of like the layers you were talking about with the elemental plane. And just the Titans happen to make a little bubble in between all of those to either check on things, etc.
We have all these questions about the true story behind Odin and Helya, and how cool would it be if like the Infinite Dragonflight or something like took us back, and that we saw more details about that, and how he went into the elemental plane of air or something. I mean, I highly doubt they would do that. I just think that would be really cool.
I think that would be incredible, because, well, I want to see like truly how he cast her out. Like, I want to see that whole entire thing, because you only get her complaining about it and pissed, and then him going, "Oh hell yeah!" Like you don't get the full like distinctness of it. And I would love to actually go and have the Infinite Dragonflight or something go into the whole entire story of that.
Well, actually, Golden Ash, yeah, the Dragon Isles supposedly no one's been able to access. No one knows where it is. It's mysteriously missing, right? And I mean, we already seen that the dragon shrines are like almost in different pocket dimensions or something. We've only seen the red one and the black one, but it's like they're in their own little areas that don't exist out on Azeroth, and I wonder if that's intentional. But they could definitely be part of the elemental planes. That's entirely possible, considering that at the time, that was when Odin was technically still around in Ulduar. It was right around that time of their creation when he leaves, and Helya was still there at the time. So they definitely could have some kind of intricate story there in which, at what point he cut it off and he took Helia away from them. Could he have taken Helia away because she was actually, helping them out? Or it's really interesting when you think about it. But also that the Dragon Isles. It reminds me a lot of like Breath of the Wild. How I don't know if you've played Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda, but they're basically drawing on a like I think it's Japanese mythology where there's different dragons that represent different like strengths, and then they fly up into the sky and like take a portal basically to an alternate realm. So I kind of get the impression it's totally possible the Dragon Isles could be tying in that same mythos about how like it's a separate realm just for dragons or something.
Right. And the thing is too is that we're going to go on those island expeditions in BFA too, and we're supposed to be going on a Black Dragon Isle. And they said, like, a lot of people are speculating if possible the Dragon Isle's finally coming in this expansion or possibly soon, which would be great because people have been wanting that for God knows how long.
Yeah, that would be cool, Golden Ash. So far though, the dragons we know of today, they don't go to the Dragon Isles. Like Alexstrasza, Nosdarmu, like none of them go there at all. I think it's like lost somehow, but it's interesting how they're going to introduce it. We don't entirely know. Um, is the Dragon Isle something that was for Protodrakes? Was it something just for the aspects? If it was the aspects, why don't they go there anymore? Like, why don't we really know about it? Why haven't we heard about it? Because they're the original aspects. They're like the progenitors of all of the dragons. Um, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I definitely think it's a possibility that that has something to do with the elemental planes, seeing as Odin himself says that the dragons have elemental blood, and we already know the story of the um, proto drake creation and how they were like imbued by bits of the elements that escaped when they were trying to put them into the planes.
It'll definitely be cool if we see that and actually kind of get some more answers on that because there is still a lot of questions in this game that we're looking for.
I guess we kind of talked about Ragnaros a lot. We talked about Neptulon a lot. Therazane, I mean, there isn't really more to say on her apart from the first half of the stream today about Maraudon. Like, we already kind of touched on that a lot. Alakir, like, is there anything else that we could really say about him? I feel like so far Thunderaan and Alakir, the plane of air, just in general, has been so irrelevant throughout all of WoW. We get a hint of it in Uldum, and I know that Uldum is going to come back and we're going to learn more about that stuff. But
Right.
at this point, I feel like they've been the least relevant, like overall, in terms of storyline integration.
Which is a shame because there's so much opportunity to just involve them and have a great reason to have them in the storyline. But I feel like it would be really hard to tie them in with the current teams we're going with already. Because like the other elementals, like they're just so much more iconic, I suppose. And because like Alakir ended up being such a flop in Oldham, unfortunately, it's kind of harder to tie him in because they don't really have a basis to go on already. Like they don't already have that exact okay, this happened, you remember this. It's kind of like they're going to have to remind us like, do you remember this happening? Of course you do. Okay, here you go. This is what happened.
Right? I think the only thing that really interests me was Alakir's son. Alakir's son had way more to do with the game than
Yeah.
anything. He was more of a divining piece, and hence why I think that there's him being part of the next Lord. And the only thing that really interests me, I'm going to have to be honest with this in Cataclysm, I wasn't interested in Alakir. You know, I was more interested that they had 4 different Drake of the North, West, South, and East. They had all those Drakes for each wind of that aspect. Found that to be the most interesting thing, that there was that. That's it.
Yeah.
That reminds me a
Why
lot of
drink?
like Pandaren lore with the 4 directions.
Right, exactly.
What were you gonna
It
say?
seems like it seems like they were trying to like set it up with the Pandaren lore, but then it's really interesting that they used drakes because drakes don't usually get tied in unless we're talking about dragons and dragon aspects. So it's really nice to actually see them get introduced somewhere else. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Do we have anything else we'd like to say about, or you guys have any bits that you'd like to mention for Rag, Therazane, any of them?
I think we kind of covered it all. And we're kind of at that time.
Yep.
All right. Let's wrap this up then.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. We do this every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. If you have not joined our Discord, please take a look over there. We're always chatting about the lore, trying to put up our stream schedule on there so you guys can know like when we're gonna go live, and we are working on some videos in the meantime, so you can keep an eye out for those.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be focused on getting some juicy content out for you guys and speculation for upcoming BFA and even stuff that really hasn't been noticed all the way back in vanilla. So keep an eye out for that, guys. Until then, have a great one, and we'll see you in the Discord because we love chatting about lore all the time with you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.